You can wait a minute. Yeah. Oh, we haven't started yet. And so this is typed in. Yes. Hi. Can I please have your name?
Jayla, Rita.
Jayla?
Right.
Yes. Yes. Do you have someone else to be your appointment?
No, I already finished.
Just know when you're ready. You can pick whatever you just need to move it.
When you're ready.
Thank you so much. What makes you happy? Is it going shopping with your friends or maybe playing your favorite sport? For me personally, happiness is curling up with a good book or spending time with my family. The Association of Psychological Science observed that people who score higher on well-being scales have better relationships, both socially and at their jobs, make more money, live longer and healthier lives, and are better citizens to society. However, a 2024 Gallup poll found that only 47% of American adults are highly satisfied with their life, which is an over 27% decrease since 2020. To many, happiness is something that is impossible to obtain. However, everyone can be able to achieve it. Looking at the neuroscience of happiness and the factors that influence it, we will explore the abstract concept of happiness in a more concrete way, and finally, learn how to become happier. Snapping over to our first topic, let's look at the neuroscience of happiness by first discussing the 4 happy hormones: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is an important part of your brain's reward system that is usually associated with pleasurable sensations along with learning and memory. Serotonin helps regulate your mood as well as your sleep, appetite, and digestion. Oxytocin is essential for childbirth, breastfeeding, and strong parent-child bonding. Endorphins are your body's natural pain reliever, which your body produces in response to stress or discomfort, but also when you engage in reward-producing activities. These hormones are produced when our nervous system reacts to a stimulus. Diane Kelstrup, a long-term psychiatrist at Stanford Health, said in an interview that at the end of the nerve, when it's going to need to pass a message on to the next neuron, there's a synaptic cleft between them because they don't actually touch. When the signal gets to the end of the nerve, that signals all the little packets at the end that contain serotonin or whatever that nerve is in that nerve to release. Then they kind of drift across the synaptic cleft and hit the receptors on the second nerve, and the signal continues down from there. After processing all that information, we are ready to move on to the factors that can cause happiness. Ed Diner, a professor of psychology who has spent over 3 decades researching happiness, identifies that there are 4 factors that contribute to happiness. They are social relationships, temperament and adaptation, money, and society and culture. Happy people have strong relationships. A study conducted by Diner found that the happiest 10% of participants all had strong and supportive relationships. He found that while having a strong social network doesn't guarantee happiness, it is a requirement to be in the happiest group. Temperament influences mood. Diner explored the set point theory of temperament, which suggests that while people experience different moods in response to life events, they ultimately return to a base level of happiness. While there is evidence supporting this theory, researchers have shown that individuals who undergo significant loss, such as being fired or losing a spouse, do not often fully adapt, or it can take years for them to do so. As Diner described, it's more accurate to think of it as a moving baseline rather than a fixed point. To quote the article, whoever said money can't buy happiness needs to look at the research. Diner found that wealth is actually related to happiness, especially in poorer communities. However, the amount of happiness someone gets depends on how much they are receiving. The Association of Psychological Science uses the example of someone on the verge of poverty versus a millionaire. Someone on the verge of poverty will be overjoyed at the prospect of receiving $5,000, while a millionaire might not share their same level of excitement. This is what makes money toxic. One study asked individuals if money was more important than love. The percentage of people who replied yes were less likely to be happy and seemed destined to never be happy, regardless of how much money they made. Studies on twins and adoptees have also shown that about 50% of the variation in happiness can be credited to genetic factors. However, Nova Psychology warns, this does not mean that our happiness levels are predetermined and unchangeable. The other 50% is influenced by our circumstances and, most importantly, our thoughts and behaviors. Brightening the mood and switching gears, how can people become happier and better individuals? The United Kingdom's National Health Service gives 6 tips on how to become happier on their website. They include managing stress levels, enjoying yourself, talking, having a healthy lifestyle, talking and sharing, and boosting your self-esteem. Stress is a part of everyone's life, and learning how to manage it is essential to becoming a happier individual. The NHS says if you have a lot of stress in your life, find ways to reduce it, such as learning a few time management techniques. In addition, Mayo Clinic recommends meditating or practicing other mindfulness activities to reduce stress. Enjoy yourself by doing the things you like hobbies or something you're good at. Having a healthy lifestyle also boosts your happiness. This includes everything from getting exercise to eating a well-balanced diet. While exercising might not sound super fun, you do not have to do a full-on cardio workout every day to boost your happiness. Dr. Scott Lear says that people report feeling happier after just 10 minutes of exercise. Communication is important in happiness as well, whether it's with a therapist or close friend. Talking with someone you trust helps relieve tension and strengthen relationships. They also suggest boosting your self-esteem. In the article, they say the best way to improve your self-esteem is to treat yourself as you treat a valued friend, in a positive but honest way. Another thing to do is take a social media break. While apps like Instagram and Facebook are great for keeping up with friends, they often do not portray an accurate picture and can be harmful for your self-esteem. The Social Media Victims Law Center reported that social media apps appear to cause a decrease in self-esteem. Social media can cause people to engage in high levels of comparison, which can lead to a lower self-image. To fix this, you can set social media time limits or only allow yourself to go on social media during certain times of the day. While these tips may seem really simple, the journey to happiness can be difficult, and there's no easy yellow brick roadway to happiness. We often equate happiness to the material possessions, life events like graduating or placing at speech meets, or other successes. Comparison is hard in the age where social media rules over our world and paints the unrealistic picture of unobtainable happiness. We get so lost in what we think happiness should be, we lose sight of what it truly is. Happiness is not an end goal or destination. Happiness is the relationships we make along the way. Happiness is the small moments where time seems to stop. Happiness is the quiet milestones we achieve before reaching our main goal. Happiness is everything. Ultimately, that feeling of happiness you get when enjoying your favorite activity is so much more than it appears. It is a complex process that involves hormones and neurotransmitters. It is affected by many factors, including social relationships, society and culture, and genetics. You can become happier by managing stress levels, taking care of yourself, and doing the things you enjoy. Sometimes true and lasting happiness appears unobtainable. However, every person can be able to achieve it. The journey will be hard, and there will always be bumps in the road, but everyone deserves to be happy. You just have to be resilient and try to find good in your life. Thank you.
Picture this. You find yourself at a campfire. The glow of the flames illuminate your face, and you see familiar faces with the air thick with stories of the inexplicable. Someone leans in and whispers about a friend of a friend who had a close encounter with a killer in the backseat, or a haunted house that draws in thrill seekers every Halloween. These tales grip our attention and blur the lines between fact and fiction. Welcome to the world of urban legends. Urban legends captivate us because they resonate with our shared experiences, our fears, and most importantly, our curiosities. They're not merely stories. They mirror societal issues and ongoing human experiences that shape and influence generations. This allure is fundamental to understanding the impact of their origins and how they perpetuate in society. Today, I'll explore what defines an urban legend, the psychological factors that contribute to their existence, and the role of cultural context in their evolution. And hopefully, I hope to illuminate to you how these seemingly fantastical stories shape our beliefs and continue to change our societies. So first, let's understand what defines an urban legend. Urban legends are contemporary folklore, typically involving fictional stories passed down from person to person, generations to generations. They have moral and cautionary twists that allow us to understand the impacts of them. The term urban legend was popularized by folklorist Jan Harold Lundgren in the 1980s. He described these urban legends as anecdotal narratives that often serve to convey moral lessons or societal anxieties. So, for example, when we look at the urban legend of Bigfoot, Bigfoot warns us of going deep into scary forests and be wary of such situations, which allow us to foster more fear and be more safe as a collective society. Moreover, these legends often have certain events that occurring in a recognizable way, making them feel more relatable. For example, when we look at Bloody Mary, the ritual, which invites participants to summon a spirit, reflects cultural fears of the unknown and draws on more childhood experiences, making them more memorable. If I had a time for every single time I was scared of Bloody Mary, I would have maybe $5. It's not a lot, but it shows that there's a cautionary twist to it, and it impacts our own childhood experiences, such as Bloody Mary. This urban backdrop enhances the legend's relatability and memorability, leading to its proliferation among peers, as explained by Fine in an article in 2018. In summary, urban legends are characterized by their communal storytelling nature, yet each carries underlying themes that mirror societal fears and belief. When we look at Bigfoot, we see that Bigfoot warns us of the impact of going deep into dark forests at night and to be wary of such tales. And Bloody Mary therefore taps into a childhood collection and therefore shapes our own experiences growing up. But that's not all. We have to understand the psychological factors behind urban legends that shape them today. The emergence and persistence of urban legends is due to this psychological factor that continues to impact them. One such factor is the concept of the fear of appeal, where stories inciting fear are more likely to be remembered and shared. Research from Julian Morrow in an article from the National Library of Medicine in 2018 shows that negative emotional reactions such as fear or anxiety makes narratives more impactful and enduring. An example is a widely known urban legend told as The Hook, where a couple is warned about an escaped convict with a hook for a hand, endangering fears of vulnerability and danger in romantical encounters. The hook plays a role into the fear of individuals and also has a cautionary moral twist to it of warning us of the dangers of going deep into the night. Additionally, social psychology plays a vital role in the way urban legends propagate. Humans often have an innate desire to belong and share experiences. This act of sharing urban legends creates a sense of collective community and shared identity from a multitude of individuals. A study by DM and DePalo from the National Library of Medicine states that they indicate that storytelling activates social bonding, thereby encouraging the transmission of these legends. Ultimately, the psychological allure of fear and the need for connection contribute heavily to the existence and the endurance of urban legends by playing a deep role into our individual desires for fear and our collective group of sharing stories. Allows for urban legends to have a deep, wide impact on communities and individuals as well. But lastly, you have to understand the cultural context of urban legends. Cultural context shapes urban legends significantly, allowing them to adapt over time, reflecting change in societal norms. For instance, the legends about killer clowns became slightly prevalent in the late 20th century, tapping into the collective anxiety surrounding societal change and perceived threats to safety during a period marked by increased media coverage of violent crimes. Through the urban legend of killer clowns, we can also find the cultural norms or even shapings of fear that occur in certain societies. Furthermore, we can see that the internet has dramatically influenced the evolutions of urban legends, allowing them to spread faster than before. What's known as creepypasta, for short, horror-related legends or images have been a copy-pasted around the internet, illustrate how technology serves both as a breeding ground and a megaphone for these narratives, as explained by Baker in 2019. Thus, the cultural context in which an urban legend arises influence its themes, structures, and perpetuation, illustrating the interplay of technology and folklore and societal dynamics that can be observed. So in exploring what defines an urban legend, we've discovered that these narratives serve as communal folklore intertwined with societal anxieties and moral lessons. We've also looked at the psychological factors such as fear, appeal, and social bonding that contribute to their transmission to a multitude of individuals. Lastly, the cultural context plays a crucial role adapting legends to reflect contemporary concerns and technological advancements in certain societies. Urban legends remind us of the power of storytelling, how tales crafted around campfires can reveal our deepest and darkest fears. They shape our understanding of reality and connect us through shared experiences. So the next time you hear a gripping urban legend, consider not only the story itself, but the fears, questions, and even cultural truths that it conveys. After all, while these just may be stories of some of us, they echo the very fabric of our collective human experiences as a whole.
Go look at our
research papers. I'm sure we've all come across them before. Some of us have tried to read them. And, well, stuff like mitogen activated protein kinase, 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 kinase would make us all go, nope, and check the ingredient list on the gummies we were eating as a snack to see if there was the wrong type of mushroom in there. Science communication sucks. Testifies someone who spent an ungodly amount of time trying to understand it. But what is science communication? Science Europe defines it as the practice of informing, raising awareness of science-related topics, and also getting involved with audiences that include, at least in part, people from outside the scientific community. So, let's talk about science communication's flaws. You know what highlights it perfectly? Misinformation and how it spreads. I mean, why do so many people believe in conspiracy theories now? Well, they're accessible, they cater to opinions, and people don't trust institutions, all of which are flaws that a lack of science communication can bring. So, let's analyze all three of these flaws. Let's start with science communication's fatal flaw, accessibility. What's easier? Going to TikTok to watch a 35-second on average video, or reading a research paper? And what's more fun? And what does not need my personal method of treating it like a melodramatic soap opera with way too many characters to parse? The TikTok. While it is amusing to go, rhodopsin? There you are, meets a photon and isomerizes to become an all-trans conformation. Great, that's a plot detail I have to write down. Not everyone has the time or patience to do something like this. And the time it takes for me to read a research paper, someone could watch, on average, 240 TikToks. And I guarantee you, one of those TikToks is going to be a conspiracy theory. Milo Rossi, a science YouTuber, and one of my favorite long-winded rants, otherwise known as a lecture, in the University of Maine states. These theories are easier to come across than real science. There's a lot more of these out there, so people are going to stumble across it more than they're actually going to stumble across real science. And he points out another flaw in the same video. I don't think that reading a research paper, is something for the layperson to have to do. He continues, it is the job of the science communicators to be able to bridge the gap between complicated science and the general public. So, this is the closest that they can get to actual science. That is going to be the thing that they listen to. And he's right. Science language is not easy to understand, and science is not easy to come by, all of which are flaws in the accessibility of science communication. Let's move on to the second, more fatal flaw of science communication, opinions. I see those pesky little comments telling me that the scientific community is wrong all the time. And their evidence? This very specific bit of science cherry-picked out of context. And sometimes, no matter of context or reason will help these people understand. People go overboard with opinions, myself included. KQD points out, conspiracy theories can provide our brains with easy answers that jive with our preconceived notions and biases. They tend to appeal to System 1 thinking, our emotions, intuition, and gut reactions. According to psychologists, they play to some of our innate human desires, like the desire for certainty, security, and belonging. They tend to pop up in times of crisis. Okay, let's contrast this with the scientific method. In case you don't remember, the American Museum of Natural History puts it in a few simple steps. Define a question to investigate, make predictions, gather data, analyze data, draw conclusions. So, I'm sure we can all see the difference here. Scientists don't let opinions sway their analysis of data. Teaching people the scientific method is where science communication comes in. As Christina Gill states, it's not that every human being is subject to these tendencies towards biases in our thinking all the time, but we have them in our brain chemistry. And when you put all those fallacies and beliefs together, what you get is a room full of people screaming their heads off about their own ideas, listening to no one except themselves and those who repeat their thoughts, and refusing to acknowledge any evidence that doesn't support what they already think, which is something that has become increasingly common in our time. Let's move on to the third, most fatalist flaw, distrust in institutions. Want an example? The government wants you to believe that fatalist isn't a word, but they're lying to you. People who have majored in literature are lying to you. You cannot trust them. Sound familiar? As Andrew McPeak, someone who writes about science and technology, shares, more people are believing conspiracy theories today because there is more evidence than ever confirming that their suspicions are true, that they are being lied to by people in power. This information, even when it's false, is presented as true, utilizing well-manipulated data, and is thus just as convincing. And the scientific community is an institution, often deemed to have power. But is that true? Well, no. Science as a whole is not an institution. There is the scientific community and individual scientific institutions meant to help scientists, but it may be hard to remember that science is not a monolith. There are so many different groups and so many different disciplines. Scientists all have different backgrounds and come from different beginnings. And it may be hard to remember that because of the ivory tower of academia, which we do not have access to. As Pressbook states, transparency helps to level the playing field by making implicit expectations of academic work explicit to everyone. So, they really should stop gatekeeping. Now that we've seen the massive advantage to misinformation, accessibility, catering to opinions, and distrust in institutions all gives misinformation, I hope that I have put warning signs on the massive holes in the ground that is science communication. Misinformation has never benefited society. Disguised as skepticism, it makes fact fiction in the minds of its victims, and its victims are a plenty. They scream, "Science is a hoax," often silencing those who actually understand it. "Remove it from our society," they scream. Remember that the self-regulating system of science is what brought us here. Where we stand would be impossible without the progress that it fosters. And without it, society will remain still, without changing, without evolving for better or for worse. So,
judges ready? No one understands the excruciating pain of having to listen to horrible music more than I do. But no matter how much you hate, anyone claims to hate country music, chances are you've listened to a country artist before, and not so surprisingly, enjoyed it. And despite the hate that the country genre might get, it's a lot more than meets the ear, as it's not only been developed by many cultures and time periods, but it continues to redefine itself daily. So together, let's decipher the song that we call country music by first hopping in our Ford F-150s as we travel down the old town road of country music. Then we'll slide in our boots as we boot scoot and boogie into modern day country music. And finally, after saddling up our horses, we'll pull in the reins of the systemic problems within the genre. So first, let's hop in our Ford F-150 as we travel down the old town road of country music. Whenever you think of country, you'll probably think of boots, women, and trucks. But what if I told you the origins of country music were anything but that? The Library of Congress tells us American country music has roots in many older traditions, including the folk songs, instruments, and musical traditions brought by the English, Celtic, and other European immigrants,
as well as enslaved Africans in the 17th century. American country music is incredibly unique because it's a giant mixing pot of different cultures, musics, and traditions, connecting almost everyone in the world back to it, including most of us here in this room today. Country music has continued to develop from its origins. Our World Music writes about the sounds of country music and how they've changed, starting with the evolution of sound in the 1930s and 40s. Country music was instrumental in increasing morale during World War II. The Library of Congress tells us how the Special Service Division of the military introduced hillbilly bands to a wide audience of soldiers, leading to country standards being spread among American soldiers, leading to connecting people of all ethnicities, genders, and faiths. This wartime music is why country music still focuses on nationalism and patriotism today. Next, there's the Nashville sound in the 1950s. It's one of the most influential in the popularization of country music. Famous country singers during this time include Jim Reeves, Brenda Lee, and Tammy Wynette. Or Nashville shows that one of Nashville's biggest impacts on country music is the creation of Grand Ole Opry in 1925. It was the first live radio station to play country music and quickly integrated into modern society, providing a place for anyone who plays country music, whether they are established or just starting up, to play their music for a wider audience of people. After Nashville, the next pivotal time period was in the 1960s and early 70s, the period of outlaws and honky-tonk heroes. Or Nashville continues that famous singers like Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and Johnny Cash started to draw from grittier inspirations, transitioning country into a more authentic and unapologetic style of music. From here, country continued to develop before finally settling on the familiar 21st century style of country music that blasted in my car on the drive here. Next, let's slide in our boots as we boots could boogie into modern-day country music, looking first at its growing popularity. Streaming services make country music more accessible, resulting in more young people's Spotify Wraps, shifting country. Variety News in April of 2023 even states, though country has historically lagged behind rap and pop on streaming services, the genre has caught on in a big way, even on Gen Z favorite platforms like TikTok. It is looking to have yet another big year with the popularity of crossover collaborations. Streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and even YouTube work in tandem with popular social media apps like Instagram and TikTok to spread music to a more diverse audience. That 12-hour TikTok ban might have had the country industry about as scared as it had me. Due to country music's rapid expansion, more problems are being called out in the media and by country singers themselves, one of which being sexism. While the world continues to recover from systemic sexism, country music seems to have a particularly slow rate of progression. Country songs often comment on women and not in a positive light. The University of South Carolina tells us many of the ways that country music has taken a sexist turn, including using slang words that portray women as inferior, implying that a woman's worth is determined by her appearance, suggesting that women are objects, referring to women primarily as strippers or other sex workers, and referring to violence against women in a positive manner. The Communicator in 2017 further explains that men who listen to violent, misogynistic music are more likely to become more aggressive, and women are more likely to accept their abuse. So the lyrics of these songs have a significant impact on society today, including many of the people we probably know in our own lives. So finally, let's saddle up as we pull on the reins of country music's systemic problems. Traditional country music often focuses on a specific demographic, often straight, middle-lower class conservatives. In Jason Aldean's hit song, Try That in a Small Town, the ideas of nationalism are brought to a forefront, as Aldean warns the world about what will happen if they try to deface his guns, an American flag, or the police. Protecting our national identity is incredibly honorable. Even Johnny Cash wrote a song about our ragged old flag. However, it seems the country industry might have woken up on the wrong side of the truck bed, because some of the themes of country music can cause much harm. Maren Morris would preach women empowerment and inclusivity in her songs, but it seems that the non-traditional country singers either have to silence their own opinions or are driven to quitting. As according to NBC News on September 19th of 2023, Maren Morris quit the country music industry and moved away from Nashville because there was too much sexism, racism, homophobia, and transphobia. However, somewhere along our drive, women were able to step out of the passenger seat and take control of the wheel, as they break down barriers that the industry has set for them. The Grammy Awards in 2019 tell us about how modern country trailblazer and multi-time Grammy Award winner Casey Musgraves has expressed her vision for moving past the age-old gender barriers in country music, saying she's hoping we can get back to a musical world where talent and uniqueness get you further than politics. And when Beyonce, whether we think it was deserved or not, won Album of the Year with her country album, Cowboy Carter, she exemplified increased women empowerment. And she also broke down barriers by becoming the first Black woman to hold the #1 spot on the Billboard Top 100, showing that progress is possible. And it's only a matter of time before country music transitions back to its roots, where diversity and inclusion are celebrated. So let's all thank Beyonce for putting us back on track. And so even if you hate country music, the progress the industry is making and the barriers it's breaking are well worth the controversy. Together, we started off by hopping in our Ford F-150s as we traveled down the old town road of country music, discovering how war, past artists, and Nashville have played a role in the genre's evolution. Then we slid on our boots as we boot scoot and boogied into modern day popularity and sexism. And finally, after saddling up our horses, we pulled on the reins of the systemic problems within country music, discovering the political divide and how growth will lead to inclusivity, allowing us all to find something in country music that we can connect with. Thank you.
I have something to confess. This whole speech and debate thing isn't the only thing I do. On the few Saturdays I'm not in a random high school talking about East Africa or the most recent executive order, I am the foundation of many people's support systems. And I'm not talking about listening to the people I love, but rather the people, strangers in my community. See, I'm a barista. I serve the people in my community support in the form of coffee. But something people don't realize is that coffee is more than caffeine. It's connection. So today, let's start by grinding the beans of coffee history. And as we wait for our brew to finish, we can check in with our friends to discover the culture around the coffee pot, before finally topping our drink with a little bit of whipped cream, sitting back and seeing what our daily sweet treat can do for us. Now, like any good roast, the origin and history of coffee's role in society is rich and deep in flavor. The Institute for the Scientific Information on Coffee finds that the cultivation and trading of coffee began in Arabia during the 15th century. And by the 16th century, public coffee houses were becoming very common in the Middle East. Here, people would connect with the community by listening to performers, playing games, and discussing recent events. These businesses soon became the epicenters of communities, offering a great environment for the exchange of information. And the growing presence of coffee in global trade led to the spread of coffee houses around the world. European philosophers and historians of the 17th and 18th century gravitated towards these environments because of the free-flowing discussion. Public coffee houses soon became integral to several cultural and political transformations of the time, as the likes of Voltaire or Rousseau would meet over a cup of coffee. And with an origin rooted in philosophical discussion and connection, coffee houses have become important in rallying community by fostering the roots of collective action. These venues have served as informal meeting spots for peaceful protests and demonstrations, best exemplified during the civil rights movement of the 20th century. Renowned leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. would use local coffee shops to strategize future action and conduct sit-ins as forms of protest against segregation. The use of coffee to start social movements and its ability to strengthen community bonds demonstrates the connective power that it holds. But just because we all bond over the need for some caffeine doesn't mean that we all do it in the same way. The where, why, and how you drink your coffee can greatly change the people you surround yourself with. On one end of the spectrum, we have your classic business person who needs some caffeine to get through the afternoon slump of the workday. And as cut and dry as that sounds, there is more to the story. A study of public workers in Denmark found that office employees would build what they described as, quote, communities of coping during coffee breaks. These short 5-minute breaks would allow individuals to vent frustrations and alleviate stress from the workday. Even just the presence of coffee can create community and social networks that we rely on. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you're going to find that classic white cup and dark green logo. Like the communities of coping in the office place, small groups are still building themselves around coffee. And for young, impressionable teenagers in high school, that seems to be the Starbucks cup. Mackenzie Kavanagh analyzes this relationship with a particular focus on the coffee community of teenage girls in her 2023 Medium article titled "The Starbucks Cup, an Everlasting Trend." She found that a lot of young girls are purchasing Starbucks drinks likely due to the bandwagon effect that they are so susceptible to. It's hard to pinpoint or explain just how exactly Starbucks drinks entered the younger market, but once they did, the drinks exploded into popularity. It is nearly impossible to walk from one classroom to another in a high school without seeing at least 3 girls holding a Starbucks cup in hand. And with the prevalence of the brand, Kavanagh states, quote, "The Starbucks cup represents both the conformity and community that is womanhood," or more specifically, girlhood. The teenager in your math class likely purchased the drink to fit in at school, but Kavanagh argues that the importance of the Starbucks drink is linked to the status that the cup holds. To purchase a $7 cup of coffee on a daily basis sends a message, one that shows the wealth and high status of an individual that belongs to the in-group. While these two examples are very drastically in the type and strength of communities that are built on or supported by coffee, it is clearly demonstrated that these drinks have evolved to a point in our culture where the type of coffee you order, or how you drink that coffee, can be seen as an extension of your identity, values, and characteristics. Which makes me really concerned for those people who drink from the "don't talk to me till I've had my coffee" cups. However, I can't really blame them. As much as I love my friends, and I don't mean to discount them, but I do rely on my sweet treat to get me through the day. And I'm not alone. The most recent study conducted by the National Library of Medicine found that roughly 35% of coffee drinkers exhibit signs of caffeine dependency. This means that just one day without caffeine can cause headaches, fatigue, mood swings, difficulty concentrating, and irritability. Hence the "don't talk to me till I've had my coffee." Now, dependency on caffeine has likely increased alongside treat yourself or sweet treat culture, which has climbed dramatically in popularity the last couple of years. Financial therapist Lindsay Bryan Podvin of Princeton University explains that millennials and Gen Z, unlike older generations, are moving away from the fear of punishment as a motivator to the promise of a reward. This typically includes the purchase of a small trinket, snack, or drink in exchange for being productive. Research conducted by the Science Direct academic journal even finds that small rewards that feel reasonable enough to purchase, but special enough to strive for, can be one of the most effective self-incentive strategies. Brian Podvin summarizes the sweet treat phenomena. Quote, "So often we think about rewards as things that are just for kids, and that adults should always do the responsible thing. But these treats can really act as moments of self-care." For a majority of this speech, I have focused on the connection that coffee offers in relation to community. But there's also a connection between you and coffee. While it may seem ridiculous to applaud such a mundane drink, it is important to recognize that every time you purchase a coffee, you are investing in yourself. That relationship is one of the most important connections that you can maintain, and it's strengthened every single day that you get yourself a sweet treat. So when I say that the Saturdays that I'm not here, talking to you, I spend supporting the local community, I'm not lying. Coffee is more than caffeine. It's connection. Connection to the community that has existed since the very inception of the drink. Connection to your close friends, those you can depend on to get you through the day. And most importantly, connection to yourself, recognizing that you deserve acknowledgement for your accomplishments. Because all of us are worth that $7 cup of coffee, even if it is a little overpriced.
you ever been accused of something that you didn't do? Your parents saying that you broke that vase when it was actually your siblings that broke it? Your teacher saying you didn't turn in your homework when you actually did? Being accused of witchcraft when all you did is wear the clothes that you want to wear? Well, this was a reality for those living in the town of Salem, Massachusetts in the late 17th century. The Salem witch trials had a considerable impact on many individuals and families during the time that it took place from February 1692 to May 1693. And it is important to understand what happened to emphasize the dangers of fear and hysteria and highlight an example of intolerance and injustice within American history. To truly understand the Salem witch trials, we must open the spell book and first discuss why the Salem witch trials started, what happened during them, and finally, how they were put to an end. First, we must delve into the witch's brew to discover why the Salem witch trials started. The first cause was mass hysteria and paranoia. Connor Reporting's The Salem Witch Trials, When a Legal System Fails, states that paranoia was brought on by an influx of refugees from King William's War with the French colonists, a recent smallpox epidemic, the threat of attack from Native Americans, a growing rivalry with a neighboring seaport town, and finally, the simmering tensions between leading families in the communities. All of these events that occurred in such a short amount of time at the end of 1691 led many of the citizens to become very paranoid and develop a lot of trust issues between one another. In addition to the hysteria, the legal systems of Massachusetts also contributed to the trials. According to the true legal horror story of the Salem witch trials, published by New England Law, in 1641, the legislative body of Massachusetts wrote the Body of Liberties, a collection of civil and criminal laws that included witchcraft among one of its capital offenses. The body states that, if any man or woman be a witch, that is, hath, or consulteth with a familiar spirit, they shall be put to death. This is just one of the several legislations in Massachusetts during this time, and there are many similar ones across the colonies and in Europe. These legislations made it easy for any person who is paranoid about witchcraft to accuse or even execute their own neighbors. So that's exactly what they did. Malcolm Gaskill, an English academic historian, discusses the first person accused of witchcraft in Salem in his article, The Salem Witch Trials. In January 1692, 1 month before the witch trials started, the 9-year-old daughter and 11-year-old niece of the minister of Salem, Reverend Paris, began having strange fits and saw ghosts of local women they claimed to be witches. A doctor diagnosed the 2 girls with bewitchment, leading Paris to accuse and arrest 3 women of witchcraft. These were the very first witches accused in the trials, and the authority that Minister Paris had over the town set off a panic and caused the witch trials in Salem to gain momentum. Now that we understand how the witch trials started, it's time to stir the cauldron and look at what happened during them. Before we get into who was executed, we will look at what the main means for prosecution were during the trials. In the article, Possessed, The Salem Witch Trials, historian Kathleen M. Brown states, the idea that the devil had a hand in human affairs and could insinuate himself into your heart and your thinking and try to seduce you away from God was a very normative belief. Religion was the main reason that people were prosecuted and accused of being witches. The established religion in Salem during this time was Puritan, and anyone who did not conform to this were thought to be working with the devil and were prosecuted with witchcraft. New England Law's The True Legal Horror Story of the Salem Witch Trials claims that throughout the duration of the trials, more than 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft, with 20 of those people being executed by hanging, but also one that was crushed to death by stones. On average, that is 1 trial every 3 days. Often, these cases were taken to the extreme, as seen by Dorothy Good's case. Rachel Christ-Owen, Director of Education at the Salem Witch Museum, recounts her case in The Untold Story of Dorothy Good. At the young age of 4 years old, Dorothy was accused of practicing witchcraft and was confined to prison for nearly 8 months, just because she was pressured into telling people that her mom, Sarah, was a witch. This illustrates just how unfair and crazy the accusations and prosecutions were in Salem. After seeing who and why people were executed in Salem, we can now hop on our broomsticks and learn what finally put an end to the Salem witch trials. First, a lot of backlash from the community contributed to the trials being stopped.
The article, Salem Witch Trials of 1692, published by Peabody Essex Museum, writes, "Few local people were willing to question the witch hunt initially because it could put them under suspicion. Opposition grew over the summer of 1692 as it became increasingly clear that the court was failing to protect innocent lives. What initially started as citizens of Salem being concerned about their own safety and protection grew to them noticing the injustice of innocent lives that were being put at stake. One example of the community fighting for these rights of those around them can be seen through the case of Rebecca Nurse. According to Boston Public Library's Salem Witch Trials, Rebecca Nurse was executed on July 19, 1692, at the age of 71. She was considered to be a pillar of the community prior to her arrest, thus gaining a lot of support from those around her. Attempts to defend her from the execution included a petition signed by 39 respected community members. This shows how the citizens of Salem saw the wrong in the trials and were willing to fight for the change, helping contribute to the end of the trials. The trials were officially put to an end when the governor's wife was accused of witchcraft. U.S. History's Witchcraft in Salem claims the governor of the colony, upon hearing that his own wife was accused of witchcraft, ordered an end to the trials. The governor, Sir William Phipps, made an order for a new court to be established in Salem that would not allow for the spectral evidence that allowed witches to be prosecuted. By May of 1693, everyone under the custody of the suspicion of witchcraft had been pardoned by Phipps, officially marking an end to the Salem witch trials. As we close the pages of this spellbook, I have shown you that the witch trials started due to hysteria and paranoia, as well as the legislations of the time. Then we examined that many of the cases were based on the means of religion and that they were often taken to the extreme. Finally, we looked at how the trials were put to an end through community backlash and the governor's order. Even though the Salem witch trials took place over 300 years ago, it is still very important to remember the impact that fear and paranoia can have and that your voices can influence change. So, as we end this walk down the witch's road, I encourage you all to speak up against any wrong that you find within your community and make that change.
Blame it on my juice. Blame it on my juice. This quote from Lizzo's hit song Juice is a part of her brand. Her message to her listeners that everyone is beautiful and that confidence is key. She has been a strong advocate for body positivity. For Vogue's October cover story, the 32-year-old artist said that body positivity has been appropriated and commercialized. Originally focused on fat acceptance, the body positivity movement has grown into a global movement, advocating for inclusivity, encompassing size, race, gender, and ability. The more momentum this movement gets, the more it gets hit with some major questions. Is this really about accepting all bodies, or is it just another attempt to push ideals of the past? In this speech, we will explore the history of body positivity, how social media changed that, and the perspectives of today. What I don't like is that the people this term was created for are not benefiting from it, Lizzo said. But who was this term created for? Let's rewind and step back through history and uncover the powerful milestones that led us to the world we have today. Oftentimes, the respect and worth of a woman had come directly from their looks, so much so that in many ways it would dictate their lives. They didn't have the ability to own property, have credit cards, vote, and they rarely could have jobs. Their beauty was their currency. The beauty standard included things like being thin, average height, quiet, pale skin, and feminine. When people had enough in the 1960s, the fat acceptance movement was created. This movement was led by husbands advocating for their wives in the workplace. A quote from Discovery for Eating Disorder Treatment states, "Much of the focus in fat activism has been on the oppression of fat women in particular. This can be traced back to the fat acceptance movement's ties to feminism's radical second wave, and early fat activism was spearheaded by men, but focused on the discrimination that their wives experienced. It was meant to recognize that a woman shouldn't have to be beautiful or attractive in order to be respected or simply treated in a human way. In the beginning, it had nothing to do with beauty. It was about treatment and respect. It advocated that plus-size women should be allowed jobs, not be discriminated against, and that violence shouldn't be perpetrated against them. Diets are a cure that doesn't work for a disease that doesn't exist. This was a phrase coined by this movement. The body positivity movement began as a fight against the harmful narrative that being overweight meant that they were diseased or unworthy. It also aimed to challenge the widespread normalization of eating disorders that were growing at the time. This movement transformed into an intersectional force led by women and people of color embracing a broader feminist ideology that included not only race, but sexuality, gender, and identity. The point was that appearance and respect shouldn't be intertwined. In modern day, we see more of an emphasis on everyone being beautiful rather than respect should be given to you no matter what you look like. Many believe that the modern day outlook is toxic positivity, and still pushes the belief that women need to be beautiful in order to be respected. I think it's lazy for me to say that I am body positive at this point, Lizzo said. It is easy. I would like to be body normative. I want to normalize it. This movement specifically was impacted by social media and celebrities like Lizzo. The hashtag body positivity content spread like wildfire. A quote from the British Broadcasting Corporation says that there are some who think to promote unhealthy lifestyles and encourages obesity. But those who support the movement say it's all about self-acceptance and not letting your appearance get you down. What started as a fight for body acceptance has become a full-blown revolution. Helpline states, quote, "A 2021 study examined the impact of body-positive social media on a woman's body image. It found that viewing body-positive content improved body image. Plus-size influencers often promote eating enough and dressing how they want rather than how society expects them to, trying to make social media more realistic." Dr. Fasoli adds that exposure to body-positive images on Instagram can be beneficial for both men and women. Such images are important in reminding people not to put so much pressure on images posted on social media. What I don't like is that the people benefiting from this term are not the ones it was created for. You know, the girls that need to be benefiting from the mainstream effect of body positivity now. It gets made acceptable, says Lizzo. Many people, specifically women of color, the LGBTQ community, and disabled people, don't feel included, many claiming that it has been whitewashed. This movement transferred from an intersectional feminist movement to a white feminist movement, which is when women don't include their other identities within the feminism. A quote from Ohio State explains the same quote, "This movement, originally formed by a group of fat queer black women in the 1960s, was at its heart a fat liberation movement. It was meant to create a space by and for marginalized bodies. It was absolutely revolutionary for this group of women to demand respect from society. It seems as though society has taken this movement, originally an absolutely radical rebuke of societal beauty standards, and warped it to still be revolutionary, just not too revolutionary. The issue people have with the message is that it has become too centered on people who in many ways already fit the beauty standard. However, many women still find this movement successful. Ashley Vicera, an expert in eating disorder treatment, explains that the positives of this movement include body positivity, which combats fat phobia, body acceptance, which has improved mental health, body neutrality, which encourages a focus on a body's function rather than its appearance, and body respect, which promotes treating your body well. Showing that whether or not this movement is ideal, it has definitely improved many women's confidence and self-happiness. Very Well Mind, a self-improvement website, states, quote, "Research indicates that body satisfaction is linked to disordered eating, particularly among young adolescent girls. However, what we can see more than anything is that these issues haven't stopped. In fact, since the 1960s when the fat acceptance movement was created, the number of people with eating disorders has still doubled, no matter the attempts at body acceptance." In a previous interview with Rolling Stones in January, the singer said that she hoped that people recognize that she is so much more than her body. She said, "Because I actually present that, and I have a whole career. It's not just a trend." Today, we learned that the body positivity movement was started by intersectional feminists who believed a woman's worth should not be influenced or brought on because of her looks. Then we saw how social media and celebrities changed this, making it more mainstream, claiming that everyone is beautiful, rather than people should just be treated well because of the fact that they are human. And lastly, we looked at how people now view the movement, both positive and negative. Overall, the body positivity movement was impactful and changed many people's opinions, but definitely strayed away from its original purpose.
Have you ever wanted to be a farm wife? You could cook and clean all day, take care of chickens, own a few fluffy cows, and have your partner pay all the bills? Awesome! I have the best app for you. Farmers Only. It's a free dating site for anyone with a hankering for a rural lifestyle. Obviously, over time, dating has drastically changed. From newspaper ads searching for a spouse to entire generations complaining that people are only looking for one thing. So, when you're getting swiped, replace getting set up. Or, how do people truly make connections in today's digital world? Today, we'll create our profile on a dating site to explore the history of dating. Because really, what do we have to lose? Then we'll cast our reel into the pond and examine the candidates, uncovering how technology has reshaped the dating game, before finally deciding whether or not we want to delete our profile and take a chance on the real world by uncovering the modern implications. As we start filling out our personal information, we recognize that love and dating has always been a fundamental part of human life. But the way we go about finding it has changed drastically over time. In the 1900s, matchmaking largely occurred through social events, like family or community ones, where women would court men under the watchful eyes of their families. After that, however, we put our information next to the daily cartoons for anyone to read. The Daily Mail in 2024 reports that in 1930, the role of matchmaker largely belonged to the local newspaper. An online archive of over 900 million newspapers includes one clipping titled, "Midland Woman Seeks Husband." It featured a truly lonely 38-year-old woman searching for a husband aged about 50 or 60. She described herself as not a gold digger, emphasizing that she had needs of her own. At the end of the ad, she asked for an educated man to contact her, though whether or not she got a response remains a mystery. Maybe he ghosted her before ghosting was even a thing. Fast forward about 30 years to 1960, and cuffing season took a technological turn. Harvard students created the first computer-based matchmaking service, and for just $3, love-hungry applicants could fill out a 75-question survey and receive a computer-generated list of matches. By 1966, the service had over 90,000 users. But as technology advanced, so did the meet cute. Medium 2023 described the beginning of the digital revolution. The 1980s brought personal computers everywhere, and with it, the expansion of online dating services. Instead of posting your ideal man to the local news, you can now post your personal ad online due to bulletin board systems. The world of dating changed drastically just from 1930 to 1980, but what about when the internet was available in everyone's home? Let's cast our reel into the pond
and examine the candidates to uncover how technology has reshaped the dating game in our modern world. Technology has revolutionized how we connect with one another, and it started in 1995 when Match.com was launched. Stylight magazine commemorates the day when lonely hearts rejoiced everywhere that they can now flirt without ever having to change into their pajamas. In just the first 6 months, Match had over 100,000 users, and it paved the way for more networking sites. In 2003, lightning struck Harvard twice when Face Mash was launched. Not to be confused with Facebook, this app was also created by Zuckerberg. It allowed his male classmates to rank his female peers as hot or not. This led to many phone applications we use today, like Grindr and Tinder. However, dating, once a search for the one, has evolved into what some describe as a transactional experience. Online dating has allowed people to make more connections than ever, but it also seems to be lowering the quality of those same connections. Tate Moyer, a writer for the Michigan News Daily, explained that although we can communicate with anyone at the click of a button, Americans still feel more lonely today than they ever have. This is because the original intent behind dating apps has been forgotten. This is because the realm of online dating has become a multi-billion-dollar industry that profits off of their users staying single. The industry does this through what a psychologist, Barry Schwartz, refers to as the paradox of choice. This frequently occurs when a user hesitates to commit to a singular option because they could potentially miss a better one out there. So you could spend hundreds of dollars to each of these sites and still be single. Girl, that sucks. Now, this paradox is especially dangerous because, unlike when you're stuck of what pair of shoes to buy, you're choosing between real people with real lives. This marketing scheme is why the world of online dating has become a breeding ground for objectification, sexual harassment, and insecurity. These apps have changed how we form connections, but I promise there is still hope left for us. So let's stop examining the pool and think about if we want to delete our profile by uncovering the implications. There's a common belief that romance is dead and that the dating apocalypse is upon us. And while there is some truth to this idea, romance itself isn't dead. The internet is just the one holding the gun. A Valley magazine article explored the impact of dating apps. These platforms allow people to meet others they might have never encountered otherwise. My sister, for example, met her husband through a dating app. Despite being incredibly different, they're happier than ever. Dating apps don't have to be about searching for the one. They can simply be a fun way to meet new people. While online dating and social media has contributed to a toxic dating culture, growing awareness, like what we're discussing in this speech, has sparked important conversations. In fact, a strong counter movement has occurred. Mounting pressure from issues such as corporate negligence has prompted further research and efforts to address the flaws in these platforms. Now, this is just a small step in how we form connections, and maybe one day we'll look back and laugh about how silly they were. Like, imagine explaining Tinder to your grandkids. Back in my day, we used to judge people by just swiping left or right on their faces. Today, we created our profile on a dating site and explored the history of dating. Then we cast our reel into the pond and examined the options to uncover how technology has reshaped the dating game before finally deciding to take a chance on the real world by uncovering the implications of modern romance. In the foreseeable future, dating apps and the internet are here to stay, meaning that we all have a choice to make. In the world that is becoming increasingly digitized, it's up to each of us to decide whether or not we want our love lives to fall into that category as well. And don't forget, if you're dying to be a farm wife, Farmers Only is here for you.
encountered someone who makes us cringe. Whether it's someone yelling at a customer service worker over a minor inconvenience, or our high school classmate who insists on wearing cat ears every single day. This feeling of discomfort stems from a lack of self-awareness and a disregard for social norms. These behaviors are not simply a lack of etiquette, but often a lack of shame. Today, I will define the shame's role in our society, the benefits it can bring us, and ultimately, how we can cultivate healthy shame. Shame plays a crucial role in personal reflection and growth. When we feel shame, it signals a break in our alignment with societal expectations, guiding us toward self-improvement. But in today's society, we often try to avoid it. We fear it rather than understanding its potential. The people we consider cringe are those who don't experience shame and lack a guiding force that lets them reflect, grow, and ultimately become better versions of themselves. By recognizing shame as a catalyst for growth and accountability, we can begin to see it as something that needs to be embraced rather than avoided. Feeling shame is a vital part in our society. It keeps us in check. In an article published in March of 2023 from Iron Tree Counseling, shame is described as, quote, a natural and appropriate emotional response that helps us recognize and take responsibility for our mistakes, shortcomings, and other transgressions, end quote. Without shame in our society, we would have lost values and a lack of consistency in social norms. When harnessed positively, it can help us grow as a society and as people. Shame isn't a bad thing to feel. It's a feeling that tells us we have an action that needs correcting. What people often get shame confused with is guilt. The American Psychological Association defines guilt as, quote, self-conscious emotion characterized by painful appraisal of having done something wrong, end quote. Guilt is an innately internal emotion. It is seen as more socially acceptable due to this internal quality of the emotion. But the external qualities of shame are why it holds more weight within our society. When thinking about embracing shame, we need to consider this weight it has on us and the positive effects it can have on us in the process. When shame is allowed, it helps us grow and be accountable for our actions. It's a feeling that promotes self-reflection within our behaviors. When we feel shame, it tells our brains that our actions violated some kind of social norm and need to be stopped or changed. Rob Watson, in his July 2024 article with Decentered Media UK, writes about the importance of shame for social cohesion. He writes, quote, we can still shift our conversations to focus on and evaluate people based on their actions and behaviors. With this, we can foster a more meaningful culture, end quote. Shame, when used constructively, can benefit our society. The social improvements that it promotes reinforces this idea of growth for the better. When it's completely avoided or feared, we would lose out on these benefits. And if this is the case, should shame really be the villain that we're creating it to be and hide it away forever, never to be felt again? Shame is feared by most of our society. A well-known researcher who promotes the removal of shame is Dr. Brene Brown. She believes it's something unproductive. With this thought, she says we shouldn't allow ourselves to feel shame. And while nobody really wants to feel shame, a total avoidance of it would not do the benefits that one would expect it to. Brett Lyons discusses this in a February 2024 article with Psychology Today, saying, quote, healthy shame invites us to pause, pay attention, and reassess ourselves and our environments, end quote. Without this emotion, we would have no external influence to get us to reflect on our behaviors. It would create a social disconnect in society and promote toxic behaviors. Some of these toxic behaviors would be someone who acts openly narcissistic, or someone who breaks the boundaries of social boundaries or societal expectations. These are socially unacceptable behaviors that could be handled, but those who do not feel shame lack this self-reflective quality to stop their bad habits. When we see these people who make us uncomfortable or cringe, we see their lack of shame and behaviors as negative societal actions. It brings the question of how can we experience this reflective type of shame? To get the benefits of shame, we need to have healthy shame rather than toxic shame. Iron Tree Counseling contrasts the two terms as Healthy shame is an emotional response to shame that allows us to recognize and take responsibility for the things we need to improve on. While toxic shame is a chronic feeling of being unworthy, to a point where it affects one's well-being and the relationships to the world around them. When we can discern the difference between the two, we can also try to figure out ways to cultivate healthy shame. But due to the predominantly external emotion that is shame, we can't create our own versions of it, but rather we can approach shame with a different mindset. Rather than approaching the feeling of shame with the mindset that you are a bad person and your actions are making you that bad person, we need to approach it with the feeling that you are a flawed person that has the potential to improve. I've grown up in a shame-fearing environment all my life. I've been able to see the generational divide that shame has created, with older generations feeling that shame is necessary and younger generations feeling that shame is detrimental. Our younger generations align with a very Brené Brown mindset, seeing shame as unproductive. And growing up in a society where this is a shared belief amongst people my age, I have seen firsthand that people are less aligned with societal expectations. The increase in behavioral issues has become more prevalent, whether it be narcissistic, manipulative qualities, or people who just push the limits of boundaries within our society. Younger generations seem to lack many self-reflective qualities that come with feeling shame. I've been able to see the negative aspects removing shame from our lives has had on my peers, as well as to an extent myself. To be the best versions of ourselves, why don't we go back to a culture where shame is more acceptable? We can't hide from it. To be self-reflective, accountable members of our society, we must embrace healthy shame. It's through shame where we can grow, learn from our mistakes, and become better versions of ourselves. We need to remember this through our lives. The feeling of shame is not a bad feeling. It holds us accountable for our actions, making us better people. We need to let go of this preconceived fear of shame and allow it to be a motivator for personal growth and allow us to truly flourish, rather than it being something that holds us back. If we want to look around at the people in our lives and not cringe or be uncomfortable, we need to make shame a more welcomed and average everyday emotion. Thank you.
Growing up, I loved SpongeBob SquarePants because he taught me so many valuable lessons that I still hold dear in my heart. Be kind to every person you meet and start each day with an attitude that says, I'm ready. And of course, that mayonnaise is not an instrument, Patrick. But there was one thing that SpongeBob could not teach me: how to be a man. In fact, SpongeBob failed to teach me how to define my own masculine identity. I struggled to define this when I contrasted my interests with those of other boys my age. A lot of them enjoyed things like playing sports, but I was never a fan of that. And the inability to conform amongst men is becoming increasingly problematic and prevalent within our society. In his December 29th, 2024 article, political theorist Sean Illing at Vox says that we have an alarming number of lonely, alienated, and disaffected men in this country. So, let's absorb how today's man is shaped by our culture, then uncover its abrasive side. And finally, find the secret formula to scrubbing away the grime of modern manhood. To explain how issues have manifested within masculinity, we first have to understand how it is subjected to our social standards. Laura Eugenics of Baylor University's Department of Sociology further elaborates on the specifics, stating that the traditional framework surrounding men demands that we close off our emotions. We strive to never show weakness, seek risk and adventure, and actively reject what is defined as feminine. The archetype surrounding men demands that we avoid expressing any form of weakness that conveys what we perceive as just emotions. Emotional retention on its own is a harmful trait that emerges from a traditionally masculine mindset. But this old way of life is being encouraged by new developments. The Manosphere is a growing online collective of influencers and content specifically catered to males. And according to the State of American Men survey conducted by Equimundo in 2023, over 40% of men say that they trust voices from the Manosphere, and over half of young men said the same. And one of the most prominent of these Manosphere voices, everyone's favorite influencer, Andrew Tate. Will James at McGill University says that Tate's content revolves around the idea that men should be aggressive and misogynistic, but his wealth gives young men the economic incentive to listen to him. He flaunts this profitable lifestyle as synonymous with the traditional idea surrounding masculinity. But understand that this masculinity is a masquerade, because the narratives targeting young men with empty promises of wealth are really being used to justify harmful behaviors. On August 2nd, 2024, Sue O'Donnell at the University of Brunswick states that the suppression of emotion that is increasingly becoming common within young males may compel them to express their feelings through aggression and violence. It was also found that young boys may be bullied by their peers for demonstrating behavior that does not align with traditional masculine ideals. Understand that this culture is toxic. It serves as a breeding ground for hatred. And because of these aggressive ideals, women suffer. Criminologist Samantha Gavin states that women's increasing objectification in media, much similar to what the influencers of Andrew Tate and other influencers from the Manosphere express their opinions, it has been found to simultaneously increase in attitudes in support of violence against women. But the impacts don't stop there, because a 2020 Ad Health report finds that men who highly value traditional masculinity are 2.4 times more likely to die by suicide. The damage that is done by our long-established norms is clear. But this isn't some obscure issue that our mainstream media has just glossed over. It is front and center, commonly referred to as toxic masculinity. Now, this terminology might seem like it confronts manhood's negativity head on, but according to Keen Ling Liam at the University of Melbourne, tying in manliness with harmful connotations like these only pushes misogynists away from education, while exacerbating gender differences and agitation between men and women. Our society has got what it means to be a man all wrong. Its attempts at fixing its problems have failed. So what can be done to set things right? Well, the solution to the issues with manhood comes with a little guidance from a little piece of our childhood. Let's look to the musical talent of good old SpongeBob. And there, using the central message of his fun song, we find the solution to the problems with manliness. F is for friends. And more specifically, we need to address the lack of friendship, especially as gender-based differences continue to bridge a divide between men and women. Covering that divide requires us to be conscious about the struggles of everybody. We can acknowledge the harms of terms like toxic masculinity, but we can also acknowledge that women face harms because of traditional manhood's ideals. Empathizing with each other is the first crucial step. You is for you and me. And once we have actually come together We have to have the conversations that we have so long avoided. According to a Pew Research report from October of 2024, 66% of men say that their father significantly influenced their perception of manhood, and 47% said the same of their mother. So, parents, maybe it's time to shy away from the antiquated values of stoicism and encourage your sons and yourselves to be open. Because through each other's encouragement, properly expressing our emotions becomes that much easier. And it's for anywhere, at any time, at all. And we simply have the right to express our emotions anywhere. Nowhere should our society place a burden on anybody for simply expressing how they feel. And because of this changed outlook on men, I am more than grateful that I have had the opportunity to recognize the harms with my fellow men and try to offer some solutions. But if the majority continue to sit idly by, so many more people are at risk of physical and psychological harm. All of us, now more than ever, need to step up and acknowledge our issues. But if you ever find yourself at odds with what society expects of you, just keep in mind that silly little tune from SpongeBob, because that's how we man up.
America, the shining jewel of the Western or even entire world. The great city on the hill, where anyone from all backgrounds can come over and succeed and live the American dream to its fullest. But now, sadly, it's a facade. When looking at the U.S. debt clock as of today, we see the U.S. financial debt now reaching the heights of $36 trillion. And Visual Capitalist states that this financial debt is now the biggest in the entire world, even surpassing the likes of Japan. America, what used to be that city on the hill, what the world dreamt to be like, is now in its worst financial standing since the Great Recession. But it doesn't have to be like this. Because today, ladies and gentlemen, I'll discuss with you today how America is suffering from this financial crisis, the causes of this crisis, and how we can truly fix this rotten state of our union. To begin, let's take a look at how America is suffering from this financial crisis. From the Congressional Budget Office, they discussed that if America continues down this road of budget crisis after budget crisis, they say that this will cause the country's ability to provide for the most needy to be harmed. This means that as the debt increases further, which it has been doing now lately, we can see cuts within the entire safety net within the country, creating a state in which millions more will just fall into poverty. These deep and desperate cuts will just cause a further increase in unemployment and poverty within America. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics has stated that there are already 6 million people unemployed. And the Census Bureau also states that there are already 37 million people already in poverty. And I believe you can make some clarifications there and how bad it can get once we cut the entire safety net. Also, from the Bipartisan Policy Center, they discussed that as the debt increases further, we can see the diminishing of the dollar's value combined with the decrease of business attractiveness all across the United States. This means that as the debt once more increases, we can see the diminishing of the dollar's value, increasing inflation, combined with the loss of millions of potential jobs we could have had, but instead, they'll go over to places like Europe, Mexico, Canada, maybe even Russia of all places. And plus, does that add salt into the wound here, my friends? When looking at the Peter G. Pearson Foundation, they say that we currently spend $2.6 billion right now into the debt crisis, and it's right now the fastest growing expenditure within our government. That means our government now has fumbled so badly that we may soon need to spend trillions upon trillions of dollars through just interest rates. So, now that you know how critical the situation is, wait a minute. How did the situation become so atrocious in the first place? Well, first things first, it's blatantly obvious. Overspending. But you might be asking though, how are we overspending? And why is it a problem anyway? For more money, the better. Well, first off, the U.S. Department on Health and Human Services has stated that overspending within healthcare can drive up prices for patients, lead to the over-delaying on medical treatments, and cause the limiting of healthcare facilities for everyone, especially of those of the lower income. And on top of that, CMS has stated that we already spent $4.9 trillion into the current healthcare system right now. And we are projected to spend $5.2 trillion in this year. And guess where we rank within the world stage, folks? Last. That's right. Commonwealth Fund backs us up by saying that America ranks last in the entire industrialized world when it comes now to basic healthcare. And when looking back to the U.S. debt clock without getting a heart attack, you now must spend on average over $9,000 now just to get access to healthcare. But that is just one tip of this financial mess pyramid America has built for itself. Next level down, we see our tax system. Cato Institute explains that in many of their studies, they say that the wealthiest Americans on paper may pay 25% of their taxes, but thanks to the loopholes within our tax system, they only pay 8% or even lower. That means thanks to these loopholes within our own tax system, this is not just robbing the government, but ripping off you and me by avoiding these taxes. And the IRS in multiple of their studies say that we are losing, on average, over $606 billion, which could have been used to fix this financial mess already. What a shame. So, the one question remains. How can we fix, or even climb out of this massive hole America has dug for itself? Well, thankfully, there is hope. Thankfully. And it all starts with spending. And to sum it up in one term, financial responsibility. And I know, it's a crazy thought. Save more than we spend, but this time it's not at the grocery store, it's at the head of the federal government. Cato Institute explains that one of the many studies and many solutions to be used is to cut over expenditure within our own government. The targeted cuts within our government will be targeted at the most overspended departments within our system, mainly at the defense sector and welfare sectors, as said before. And this may sound unpopular to many of you, but the most unpopular solution is the one that works best and is our only hope. And plus, it's way better than increasing taxes on the American people, you know what I mean? So here, I'll provide an alternative to that one as well. Reforming our tax system. The way we can reform it is to, frankly, close up these loopholes within our own tax system, which is just robbing both the rich and the poor alike, causing all of us combined to suffer. And the one way we can do it is to eliminate the individual income tax expenditures, which the Peter G. Pearson Foundation defines as special exemptions from the federal income tax, or basically legal tax fraud. Once we get rid of that, we saved the $600 billion, and combined with studies from the Citizens United Against Government Waste, we can save $5.1 trillion. This will solve the debt overnight, and we might just fix Old Glory right there. Everyone, it may seem impossible to fix the situation we're in right now. but the entire world within 1776 called the colonists insane for even thinking they could create even a single stabilical foundation within this country. But when they did create this nation, they made it the best nation the world has ever seen. And if they, so-called crazy colonists, can create the foundations of the state of our union, we can unite once more as a people to rebuild the state of our union together.
Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here today. I mean, I'm really tired because I stayed up late editing and restructuring my speech last night, but that's okay because before I came in the room, I went to the bathroom and I shotgun a Celsius, so I should be totally alert and ready to go for today. Pause. Let's take a step back and examine this scene. Clearly, it is extremely over-dramatized. However, it's not extremely far off from the reality of some people who consume, or over-consume, energy drinks. If we look to the marketing styles of these brands, it's not hard to see why people might be less aware of the health risks that consuming these beverages can cause. So today, let's first make our way down the endless aisles and look into the health risks of consuming these beverages. Next, we'll pick out our favorite and dive deep into the core reason behind this issue, before finally cracking open that can and figuring out what we can do differently to minimize the effects their products have on our lives. Walking into the store, you are greeted with seemingly endless options of energy drinks. Energy increaser, mood boosting, metabolism boosting. Can one of these please give my speech for me? Regardless of their claims, all these drinks have one thing in common. They can all lead to or pose some form of health risks on the consumer or you. With the risk becoming more prevalent in the media, so does the drink's advertisements. It is like a constant battle in social media between the company's wealth greed and the consumer's health need. Teenagers like you and I are especially vulnerable to this as they are the primary consumer of these beverages. A study done by the National Library of Medicine shows that nearly 2/3 of teens have reported using energy drinks. 41% had done so recently. The stimulants used in these drinks, such as artificial sugars or caffeines, create a wide variety of health complications, spanning all the way from cardiovascular health to mental health and even addiction in some cases. While energy drinks aren't necessarily the greatest thing for you, consuming them in moderation is important if you choose to indulge in them. The National Library of Medicine states, quote, "The controversy surrounding energy drinks heightened recently due to increasing reports of energy drink toxicities, most alarming in central nervous system abnormalities," end quote. The consumption of these beverages can lead to irregular heartbeats, increased blood pressure, and even heart attacks in our adolescents. The effects they have on the mental health is not any better than the physical effects either. As we see a rise in anxiety and panic attacks in our youth, one thing is clear. The stimulants in these beverages are a large cause for this increase. The Neuro Launch discusses how consuming energy drinks has shown time and time again to be a factor in increased anxiety in our adolescents. Keeping the topic on mental health, addiction is also a result of over-consuming these beverages. Not to the drink itself, but rather the stimulants in it that keep you awake. These stimulants create an addiction, forcing individuals like you and I to become dependent on them to keep that pep in our step. Now, obviously we cannot all get 8 hours of sleep. Some of us are up late practicing a speech they told their coach they had touched the whole week, but they really didn't since the last meet. Regardless of how much sleep you're using, pumping your body full of stimulants to keep you conscious is not the way to go. Constant fatigue is the outcome of being dehydrated and not eating enough nutritious foods, as found in studies done by the National Library of Medicine. Drinking energy drinks is not going to fix this problem at its core. Now, as we scan the options for our favorite drink, we see one thing that's important: the marketing styles.
The drinks that are trending the most amongst our youth all have similar qualities when it comes to presenting themselves to the public. However, it wasn't always fun colors and TikTok lifestyle type buzzwords that got people's attention. The history of energy drinks and how they've been marketed to the public took a drastic turn around the mid-2010s, when the more popular drinks we see today popped onto the scene and the marketing teams seemingly haven't looked back since. We can compare the different forms of marketing of popular drinks from the early 2000s to the trendy ones we see today in our local cafeterias or grocery stores. Monster and Red Bull energy drinks were heavily advertised as what they were, a beverage intended to boost your energy levels and keep you more awake and alert. CNBC 2024 explains how Monster Energy specifically focused on hitting the blue-collar workers of America through their energy-boosting based marketing in the UFC, bull riding, and motocross industries. Now, looking into the more sought-after beverages of today, one thing is clear. These companies are not now blatantly lying to their consumers, saying that their drink doesn't contain any stimulants whatsoever. However, their marketing has shifted to focus on other aspects of the drink. Take bubblers, for example, which aren't focused on the energy aspect, but rather health benefits of it, as it's marketed as an antioxidant sparkling water. Burnix discusses how the drink is marketed as a healthier alternative to energy drinks, even though the beverage is classified as one itself. Celsius is another beverage I'd like to look at. Celsius is marketed as a metabolism booster, which is intended to help individuals burn body fat quicker. The company focuses on presenting it as a fitness beverage, which, quote, won't cause jitters, yet the drink contains 200 milligrams of caffeine in the standard 12-ounce can. I don't know about you, but whenever I consume one of these beverages, I feel like a hyper chihuahua whose owner just came home. Now, let us crack open a can and discuss what we can be doing differently. While companies changing their marketing styles to help the public be more aware is nice in theory, it's not a solid set solution. So it's up to us to figure out how we can minimize the effects their products have on our everyday lives. We can do this through a method I like to refer to as the 3 R's: research, reduce, and replace. Beginning with the first set of the 3, research what you're consuming. Whether you're an adult looking out for a child yourself, or just about anyone in this room, really, researching what you put into your body is extremely important in keeping yourself healthy, especially in this instance. Parallel to energy drinks in our bodies can be made with gas-running cars and diesel. Sure, it's another form of energy, however, it's not the right one, and it's going to cause complications later on. Next, reduce. If you feel reliant on these beverages like I do, do not suddenly cut yourself off. Slowly reduce how much you're consuming instead. This will make it easier to not immediately go back to them later down the line. Finally, replace. Energy drinks are fun to have, just not 24/7. While these beverages are not inherently intended to be bad or horrible for a consumer, like everything else in our lives, the line of moderation is thin, and that's what keeps something from being okay to not. On top of that, they don't solve the main cause for energy lack or fatigue. If you ensure you're staying hydrated and properly nourished, studies show that you shouldn't need any artificial sugars, caffeines, or stimulants to keep yourself awake. Maybe my over-dramatized shaking and speaking a mile a minute at the beginning was a little exaggerated. However, the marketing style we see today is still a big cause for the lack of public awareness for the health harms of consuming these drinks. This leads to the health risks we're supposed to be warned about occurring more often in our day-to-day lives. Today, we have browsed the aisles and health risks that come from consuming these beverages, picked out our favorite, and explored how the marketing shift over the years has amplified this issue, before finally cracking open that can and discussing how we can minimize the effects their products have on our everyday lives using the 3R method, which I need to do myself, because on that note, I feel a caffeine crash coming on.
what's really annoying? Being bad at crosswords. You think of all the weaknesses to have that wouldn't matter, but with the absolute frenzy surrounding the New York Times games, my stupidity is put on full display every single day when it takes me minutes to complete the many crossword. My friends and I, we've been having a competition to see who's the fastest, and of the 100-something days that we've competed, I have won a grand total of 3 times. It's gotten to the point now where if I don't complete the many in under a minute, I feel like an idiot, which is really strange because it's a pointless competition. Why would I feel like that? It's such an absurd metric to hold myself to. And you know, I started to think about it, and it's one of the many strange standards in our lives that we really don't need. So today, let's sit down and look at the theme of the many, measurements that rule our lives. And as we sit there and stare at the blank boxes, we can ponder the effectiveness of these measurements. And finally, write down the answer to one across, how to measure success. Now, thinking about the theme, measurements that rule our lives, there are a surprising amount of options that we often forget about. Things like GPA, sales goals, efficiency targets, production quotas, and pretty much everything that comes with a unit. Now, a lot of these things you may not consider a measurement, but rather a goal. And that is due to the conflation between an achievement and how we measure success. The issue at hand is that many of these metrics are no longer used to measure progress, but are rather set as the standard for success, which makes the measurement itself obsolete. Goodhart's law, founded by economist Charles Goodhart, summarizes this phenomenon. Quote, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So let's go back to the example of GPA, because I have been focusing on it way too much recently. And I have to be honest, I have no idea how that number is calculated. I just know the higher it is, the better of a student you are. And while I may not know what GPA really is, I think we all can agree that education is important. To have a strong country, you need a knowledgeable population, which means you need an education of some sort with a decent quality. But how do you make sure that education system is succeeding? You have to measure it. And that's how we get things like GPA or standardized testing. Laura Williams of the Daily Economy News Journal in January of 2023 analyzed the relationship between measurements and education. Educational policies like No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top measured the ability of a school to teach students by assessing standardized test scores and rewarding them monetarily for achieving desired results. With this large incentive, we now have a system that prioritizes test-taking abilities over actual understanding of the material. And on every level of the system, students, teachers, and even schools encourage the use of memorization, or even just cheating on tests. Look to the decade-long Atlanta Public Schools district scandal. 35 teachers were accused of changing a total of 250,000 test answers from wrong to right in hopes of securing more funding. We are no longer teaching students, we are showing them how to cheat the system. Do you see why I struggle with crosswords now? There are just too many options to choose from that would fit 4 letters across, measurements that rule high school life. So let's leave that one for now and focus on 7 down, the impacts of measurements in the workforce. The built-in organization, dedicated to following the world of startups and business tech advancements, offers an example in a May 2023 article. To increase profits, a business changes the hourly wage for call center employees to a compensation system based on the number of calls answered. Like intended, the number of calls increased within a month and doubles to what it was before. However, to achieve this increase, the employees are being very curt with the callers, greatly decreasing customer satisfaction. It's one of those quantity over quality kind of problems. And while this issue is hypothetical and seems like it only pertains to the world of sales, it persists across many industries and can have long-lasting consequences. In the research sector, it is imperative that scientists publish papers at a consistent rate to ensure future grant funding. And now, as you might imagine, research is quite an arduous process that can take a while to peer review, hindering the ability for work to be published at a frequent rate. So to fix this issue, preprint servers were made to speed things along. Without getting into too many technicalities, the largest difference between preprint servers and traditional research journals is that preprint servers do not require peer reviewing before any manuscripts are published online. And well, you can put 2 and 2 together. But to make it extra clear, let me offer some findings from the Research Hub Foundation, 235 papers, published from 2004 to 2023, mention experiments conducted on non-existent cellular material, and half of cancer biology papers fail independent replication efforts. Here we see that when a measurement becomes the sole goal of an action, it's no longer beneficial and outright dangerous. Goals that are measurements, such as the numbers of papers published per year, force individuals to hyper-focus on a singular quality, which prevents them from prioritizing what is, more often, the important things, like saving lives. And you know, with that answer, I think I can finally fill in one across. How to measure success. You don't. Senior software engineer Alex MacArthur, who focuses on creating efficient workplaces for independent businesses, outlines a solution to Goodhart's Law in his 2022 newsletter. If you can, you should try to avoid measurements altogether. I know that sounds counterproductive, but as I have shown, when we hyper-focus on a specific measurement, we ignore every other metric. And to certain aspects of life, like happiness or connections to others, you cannot measure or control how you succeed in the subject area, no matter how much you may want to. You are only going to set yourself up for disappointment. With that said, I know it's entirely naive to think that we can go the rest of our lives without measurement. I mean, if we did that, we would say goodbye to any competitive activity, a unique economy, roads with safe speed limits, and pretty much everything that is needed to make our society run efficiently and mostly fair. So if you must measure progress towards a goal, you need to measure as much as you can, and you need to measure the unmeasurable. This means using a mix of subjective measurements with objective facts to avoid hyperfixation. When we remove ourselves from the standard of a singular metric, we gain a greater representation of the whole, actually focusing on the progress we have made rather than how we compare to others or to the golden standard. So it's been about 7 minutes, and I have only finished one row of this crossword. Maybe half a couple of columns if we're feeling generous. And that's okay. I've learned that without finishing the many, I can explore multiple examples of arbitrary measurements that influence our perception of success, and then the harmful impacts that come from those comparisons, before finally learning that maybe I should consider a successful many by the happiness I experienced rather than the sub 1 minute time. Let's just hope that my friends buy that sorry excuse for my inability to finish a crossword.
Art is subjective. I mean, modern art tends to consist of one big red dot on a blank canvas. It might not look like art to you, but what if I told you that dot has a million meanings behind it? So, what makes something art? Is it about how it's made, how it looks, or even about the meaning behind it? Let's take a look at a few other things considered to be art. 1. The Starry Night. Paint on a canvas, swirly technique. Looks pretty artsy to me. 2. The Statue of David. Very well sculpted and very well detailed. Also, very artsy. Number 3. Graffiti. I mean, just look at it. It's colorful, it's neat, and it generally has a strong message behind it. However, according to Harrison in 2021, graffiti isn't considered an art. Rather, it's currently seen as a crime. Graffiti has some of the same qualities many of these other famous art pieces have, which is why graffiti should be considered a real art form. Today in this speech, I'll be going through 4 main points. 1, the definition of art, 2, self-expression, 3, spreading a message, and lastly 4, addressing the concerns regarding graffiti. Starting off with the definition of art. Sure, graffiti doesn't look like traditional art, but that's what makes art unique. There are so many different styles and types of art,
There's no box you have to fit in to be an artist. According to Oxford Dictionary, art is the expression or human application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in the visual form, such as painting, sculpting, producing work to be appreciated primarily for the beauty or emotional power. Let's break this down a bit and look at how graffiti fits into these categories. Starting off with human creative skill. Graffiti takes a lot of skill. I know a majority of you in this room struggle to make the graffiti style of letters. In fact, according to Saturation Art Department, like any artist, graffiti artists require some level of skill and knowledge regarding the arts, such as having a strong sense of design, knowing color theory, paying attention to spatial awareness, and lastly, knowing how to use spray paint. Those are just the physical skills you need to have. Some of the mental skills include having original and creative ideas and translating them into the visual art form. These are all qualities that many traditional artists have, meaning under the definition of art, graffiti is art. Moving on to my second point, being self-expression. According to the organization Draw Change in 2019 in the article named The Power of Self-Expression, art gives people the ability to express themselves. Self-expression is a way to process and recognize your emotions. Some advantages of using art as self-expression are found in a study conducted by Georgetown Behavioral Health Institute, which includes positive mood, function, cognition, and behavior. Not only that, but graffiti can give people these same benefits because according to Cole Hofer in 2022, in the article called Why Do People Do Graffiti?, many graffiti artists do graffiti to share their stories and express themselves. Denying a graffiti artist the ability to create a mural and telling them to stick to real paint is like telling Bob Ross to sculpt a statue instead of painting happy little trees. Self-expression has so many benefits. One of the main points of graffiti is to tell your story and express yourself. Graffiti must be considered art. On to my third point of spreading a message. According to the Emperor Society of America, many cities and towns already allow for street messages, such as billboards and sign spinners. Though these types of messages generally don't hold the same power graffiti does, they are still considered to be a street message. They also discussed that by this logic, graffiti is also a street message and a form of art because the message is generally more stronger. Let's imagine for a sec. Imagine a picture of a girl with green skin using spray paint. She's being watched by eyes all around her. This was a graffiti piece done by the graffiti artist Lady Pink. In the piece, there is a clear message about being seen as the outcast in society for her art. She is showing how she feels judged for her artwork. A more popular artist, Banksy, has some of the most well-known graffiti art with some of the strongest meaning behind them. Banksy's most famous piece of art, Girl with Balloon. I know a majority of you can imagine it, a little girl holding a red heart balloon. This is his most popular piece because it has a million messages behind it. Some see it as the girl losing the balloon and losing her innocence, while others see it as the girl catching the balloon and gaining love. However, the most widely believed message is the girl letting go and gaining love, joy, and true freedom. It is also seen as an allegory for hope always being with you. All these artists and their pieces have strong meanings behind them. However, art doesn't have to have a meaning. However, these artists took it upon themselves to create a meaningful art mural to share with the world. On to my fourth point. I'd like to address the concerns regarding graffiti, that concern being vandalism. By enacting this, we can add restrictions to determine what vandalism is and isn't. Of course, vandalism on someone's house and business would be vandalism, but we can create these graffiti-friendly areas to ensure there won't be a need to vandalize businesses and houses. In fact, according to Fargo-Moorhead in 2023, in the article titled Murals of Fargo-Moorhead, Fargo has some of the most graffiti-friendly areas, such as the Art Alley, which is behind the Forms Building on 1st Avenue North between 4th Street and 5th Street. This is an alleyway where graffiti artists are allowed to express themselves. Not only that, but Fargo welcomes these art murals. On the side of the Old Bison Hotel on Broadway, there is a huge graffiti piece of Bob Dylan. There's also the Fargo train carts that always have some sort of graffiti on them. And lastly, the Mario Wall, which is a graffiti mural that looks like you were in the Mario world. Downtown Fargo has some of the most beautiful murals made by graffiti artists, and it is all seen as self-expression and art. With these graffiti welcoming areas, the concern for vandalism is not something you will have to worry about. Graffiti is beautiful, unique, and creative. It has the same qualities so-called real art has, yet it isn't considered an art form. Like, are you kidding me? Even Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse knows graffiti is real art. The world is constantly changing. Customs change and evolve. Art has changed and evolved. It's time to look at all graffiti has to offer and change the stigma surrounding it. Graffiti artists are not criminals, they are artists. Would you tell Michelangelo he's a criminal because of his art? I don't think so. So why should we condemn the people that are trying to share their message with the world? Art is that, art. Doesn't matter who makes it or what medium is used. Art is self-expression, and graffiti is art.
Many of our days are essentially the same, from beginning to end. For example, many of us drive the same way to work or school every single day. Are we making a choice to do this, or have we simply engaged in autopilot? Thank you for boarding with Persuasive Airlines. It is our mission not only to ensure your safety on this flight, but also to help you reflect on your own lives. For the duration of this flight, we will embark on a journey to discover autopilot mode in our everyday lives, then experience some of its turbulent effects, before finally landing somewhere warmer than we are now with our improved sense of self. So let's buckle our seatbelts and put up our tray tables as we take off. Now that we have made it into the stratosphere, let's first turn on autopilot and examine its effects on every single one of us. Going on autopilot, while familiar, is not a commonly known phrase. The medium finds autopilot mode is a state of mind where we go about our daily lives without really thinking about what we're doing. We get up, go to work or school, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, and go to bed, all on autopilot. We essentially disengage from the world around us when we go on autopilot. Our brains can still function and we can go on living life without ever really experiencing anything we do. Many of us are living life on autopilot with no knowledge that we are doing so. Psychology Today identifies in an article published on November 1st of 2018 signs that you are living life on autopilot. Some may include your routine is predictable, you are working to please others, your time is flying, and you feel you might be missing out. Many of us experience these signs and feelings. Psychology Today found in an additional study published on November 14th of 2010, we spend around 46.9% of our time mind wandering or even mentally checked out. During this time, we are operating on autopilot and are relatively unhappy while doing so. These feelings of isolation and mundane consistency are a result of our routines and how we choose to live everyday life. During our travel, we face some unexpected turbulence as we investigate the causes and harms of autopilot. The autopilot mindset is often fueled by an underlying cause. Anna Bonet, a London-based journalist, reports, running on autopilot is often a symptom of our busy lives. Time moves so quickly, it becomes difficult to stop and savor each moment. With the amount of activities we have on top of school and work, it's easy to fall into the trap of chaotic routines. We disengage from reality as a result of our stress as well. When overwhelmed with tasks and responsibilities, it's easier to allow our brains to take over, rather than deal with our feelings.
We are all familiar with the fight or flight response, which can be experienced as anxiety and irritability, explains therapist Abby Rawlinson. But there is also another state that our automatic nervous system can enter into when we are stressed, called shutdown, sometimes referred to as freeze, where you become almost paralyzed as a way of coping with stress. Autopilot allows us to avoid the stress we feel by essentially numbing us to our surroundings. This coping mechanism, while sometimes helpful, can also exacerbate these feelings. Saba Brooks is an abuse survivor counselor and author of numerous books. She finds in an article she published on February 6 of 2019, running on autopilot all the time allows for unplanned reactions to external stimuli before the complete processing of information. When our brains expect everything to be the same, changes in our surroundings can quickly become overwhelming. She further notes, these unplanned reactions can make you feel out of control because they seem so powerful and also happen without your permission, leading to an increase in anxiety, depression, and because of an increase in impulsivity, addiction. These feelings could cause us to metaphorically crash land. Our inability to adapt to our surroundings only worsens our mental health by making us susceptible to unfamiliar experiences. With many Americans operating on autopilot, we see this contribute to the growing mental health crisis within this nation. Our mental health matters, and by living life on autopilot, we only make it worse. The flight paths of our lives are anything but smooth, encouraging us to turn off autopilot. So finally, let's buckle our seatbelts as we turn off autopilot and descend towards our destination. An article published by The Medium on April 21st of 2023 outlines some avenues by which to pursue turning off autopilot behavior. Life can sometimes feel that we are simply going through the motions, doing the same thing day after day. Thus, the first recommendation is to shake up your routine. The Medium article recommends you do something different, whether it's trying a new hobby or taking a different route to work. By changing the things we do from day to day, we step out of that familiar pattern. Take a different route on your walk. Mix up the order of your everyday tasks. Step out of your comfort zone and just wing it. The second recommendation is to practice mindfulness. The article states, engage fully in each moment and focus on the present rather than letting your mind wander into autopilot mode. When in autopilot, we tend to shut off our brains, meaning we are missing all that is happening around us. Participating in mindful activities and setting boundaries in your life can keep you centered and even more aware of what is around you. Be present in every moment that you have. As our flight comes to an end, turning off autopilot mode in our everyday lives enhances our ability to enjoy our experiences and even learn from them. This can help us combat the growing mental health crisis in both ourselves and America as a whole. As long as we can work to improve ourselves, we can expect clear skies from here on out. Now, as we disembark with a new perspective on our lives, we can work to be more present and make some much needed changes in our everyday routines. Today, we took off into the stratosphere to discover what autopilot is, experience some turbulence as we discovered the mental health harms of this behavior. And finally, we learned the benefits of turning off autopilot as we descended towards our destination. Autopilot has been in control for far too long, preventing us from being able to adapt to our surroundings. We are always going somewhere, so let's work to make that time matter by turning off autopilot. Stow your tray tables and collect all of your belongings. I hope you enjoyed this flight, and good luck with the unpredictability of life without autopilot.
What was my...
day, I was reading 1984 by George Orwell. It's a dystopian tale about a dystopian society's authoritarian regime. In the fictional nation of Oceania, all records of history prior to the government's arrival were all misrepresented to align with their agenda. All the people knew was the government. Nothing more, nothing before, just the government. As I flipped through the pages of my book, a chill began to run down my spine, because it became too realistic to just be a story. That is my concern. Denialism may be a theme in Orwell's tale. However, it is a modern-day problem, as real as you and I. The Merriam-Webster defines denialism as the practice of denying the existence, validity, or truth of something despite strong evidence or proof that it is real, true, and valid. The way the education systems and mainstream media present history is through a singular lens that often misrepresents and through the perspectives of the winners. As Princeton University puts it, the United States is in a grip crisis of bad history. But I want to uncover the truth. So embark on an exploration with me to uncover the truth. First, we'll follow the traces to the treasure of truth. Next, we'll discover the artifacts and discover why denialism is reoccurring in our society. Before finally, we polish the records and accounts to discover the mystery of the truth. Following the traces, we find ourselves in the past. What year is it? 1969. Where are we? Vietnam. Who are we? The United States of America. Back-to-back world champs. How's it going? Pretty bad. U.S. history classes often portray the United States as an unsung hero and symbol of democracy. Take the Vietnam War, for example. U.S. history tells us that the United States fought against communism to protect South Vietnam's democracy. When we pulled out of Vietnam, it was so that we could empower them through Vietnamization so they could fight for themselves. And yet, they failed to tell us the atrocities. The My Lai massacre by U.S. forces that claimed 500 unarmed South Vietnamese civilian lives, and the countless unspeakable abuses by Western forces on the Vietnamese people. They failed to tell us the crumbling domestic state, the loss of American lives, and political scandals that were the true reason to why we actually pulled out from Vietnam. To shine light on the U.S. image as the hero, we had to cast these truths into the side, into the shadows. Bias in the historical curricula is a long-standing problem, and it's not just with the Vietnam War. As the American University School of Education tells us, there were fifth graders in New Jersey participating in mock slave auctions. History has been rewritten. And unfortunately, this issue goes far beyond just the United States, but also internationally. As Advox reports, in the Philippines, the current president is the same son of the late dictator Marcos Sr., who was ousted with his family back in 1986. In North Korea, their education systems actively seek out to preach the idolization of their great leader Kim Jong-un and the perpetuation of hatred towards people of other races and other nationalities. This is the unfortunate way education is being manipulated to impose an agenda. This should not be our reality. The root of this issue lies within the documents. Let's uncover the hidden artifacts to see why denialism is reoccurring. The perpetrators, policies that cast these grim truths of history into the shadows. These laws go beyond just not acknowledging these realities, but to also censor higher level education in banning books like 1984 by George Orwell. In 2023, James R. Grossman, the director of the American Historical Association, warned of how these restrictions on educating children on divisive concepts early on endangers them of not being able to understand reality. So many tales of atrocities are cast into the shadows. despite it plaguing our history. Failing to give the whole story is denying the truth. If educators aren't allowed to educate the children in schools, then where and who can the children uncover the truth that we look for today? To finally conclude, we need to polish the records and uncover the mystery. One-sided and distorted history is what causes disconnection from the past and in the present in children and in adults. The education source in 2022 tells us that the latest NAEP test resulted with only 13% of American students scoring proficiently in history tests, while 40% of American students scored below knowledge baseline, the knowledge baseline. So many children are being deprived of the education they have the right to. This is a decline from our 2018 scores, a 34% decline. Education declines so long as we choose the cycle of denialism and forgetting. It starts with the children and in education. Failing to educate the children is failing to prepare them for the present. Better yet, the future. Despite the sugar-coated perspective history shows us, history is dark and controversial, but denial does not change it. Our ignorance contributes to the systematic injustice in society and the decline of education. And it's time we, the people, make a change and take action. We need to hold our legislators accountable for the changes they make and those who deny the truth. Negate the denial that hides within the guise of revision. Join your local school board meetings and support your education. Speak out for your words matter, and more importantly, open your mind, for it starts within us. This is a call to action to shed light on the truth. This is an effort to protect the children and enrich them. Today, we've embarked on a journey to find the lost treasure of truth. We followed the traces to the site of the treasure and discovered what denialism looks like in our world. It takes formation through education systems and overall a biased perspective. Then, we uncovered the hidden artifacts and discovered that censorship in history is rampant in our education, and it's because of policies that are passed for it. And then finally, we polished the records and uncovered the mystery of denial. It causes disconnection from reality in children and in adults. 1984 by George Orwell may be a dystopian tale, but it is a warning that should alarm us. I urge you all to stand on the right side of history, for history has its eyes on you.